Hail, adventurer! And today we're going to start this series off by talking about an introduction to Dungeons and Dragons. Today's episode is more or less about the big question: is Dungeons and Dragons really right for me? Dungeons and Dragons is a fantasy tabletop role-playing game. The boundaries of this game is determined by the limit of your imagination. You use a character sheet, dice, and of course some of your imagination, and before you know it, now you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, otherwise known as DnD. You start off by creating a character of your choice. Depending on the module or expansion that we call modules that you are playing in, you generally choose your race, class, alignment, and skills, and even a backstory to fit your character, which we'll get into all of that in the very next episode. Once you create a character, your part is pretty much done. Now it's time for your dungeon master, or DM as we call them, to create the world and adventure that your character will set off. Once the world is created and the characters are made, you play through scenarios that your DM has created for you, like dungeons, puzzles, combat, and much, much more. You can play with as little as one DM and one player, to multiple DMs and a room full of players. However, most D&D parties are best played with just one DM and around 3 to 5 players. This makes it easier for the other players to get along with each other, and you're not in a room full of strangers trying to act out your character. Also, once you start combat, it can take quite a while getting around to everyone at the table. So that's why most DMs prefer 3 to 5 players. Now, during your adventure, you will use your everyday skills as an adventurer, like cooking and hunting, which you base that off your survival skill, sneaking and disarming traps, which is stealth and sleight of hand skills, to even basic combat, using melee, ranged, or spell attacks, and even a few defenses to try to overcome the obstacle or the combat that your DM has set out for you. Which we will also get more in depth on what you do during combat in a later episode. Your skills are what makes up your character and determines how well you do during certain tasks while playing this game. When you use a skill or even in combat, you roll your dice, which is generally a d20 or a 20-sided die, and you add your skill modifier to that roll to determine how well you did at that task. So for example, if you wanted to pick a lock, the DM would set a DC or a dice check of, let's say, 15. Now you look at your sleight of hand skill on your character sheet, and let's say you have a +4. Now you roll your 20-sided die. If you rolled a 12, you add the 4 to that 12, which makes it a 16. So you successfully pick the lock. Everything that you do in D&D is basically made up of that mechanic. Now, role-playing is a large part of D&D. However, it's not really required. If you're a shy person or just don't feel like acting out your character, you don't really need to. That's the great part about D&D. However, you can use different voices, emotions, and even facial expressions to really let your party see how your character is acting in the game. If your character is a rough criminal, then you may want to talk like this. Set the tone for your character. Or, if you are a vampire elf that seeks justice against a creature that turns you into a vampire, then you may want to use this tone of voice to set the realism of your character. Like I said, like I stated before, the limitations of this game is really set by you and your friends. D&D is a great way to escape from this world into your own fantasy realm full of endless possibilities. So, if this sounds like a game you would like to play, either just you or and one other person, or even a room full of people, then get a group of your friends together to start your own campaign. Just remember, some campaigns can last years, so make sure you love your character before you dedicate to them.
Okay, adventurer. Make sure you level up by heading on over to our Patreon page to help support our local game store. You will earn epic loot and earn a spot on our Patreon wall.